park 5 new crossovers next to each other. A Toyota RAV4, a Honda CR-V, a Nissan Rogue, a Honda Tucson, a Ford Escape. Now squint. From 50 feet away, they're basically the same car. Same proportions, same ride height, same rounded-off corners, same pinched headlights, same floating roofline, same general shape that looks like someone took a box, put it in a microwave, and hit start until the edges melted. Now do it with sedans. A Camry, an Accord, a Sonata, a Mazda 3, a Civic. Same squinty LED eyes, same sculpted character lines, same aerodynamic profile that tapers at the back, same general vibe. Different badges, same silhouette. Now do it with trucks. Even trucks, the last category where designs used to feel genuinely different, are converging. The front ends are getting taller, the greenhouse is shrinking, the bodies are getting more sculpted, and the aerodynamic treatments are smoothing everything toward a common shape. People look at this and say car companies are lazy. They've run out of ideas. They're copying each other. They've given up on design. The golden age of automotive styling is dead, and now everything looks like a nervous, aggressive appliance. They're wrong, not about the observation. Modern cars do look increasingly similar, but about the cause. Car companies haven't run out of ideas. They're responding to a set of constraints, physical, legal, economic, and technological, that are pushing every car toward the same optimal shape. And those constraints are so powerful that even the most creative design team in the world can't escape them. The melted bar of soap isn't laziness. It's physics, law, and money converging on the same answer from every direction. Let's understand why. The single most important force shaping modern car design is aerodynamics. And aerodynamics doesn't care what looks cool. It cares about drag. Aerodynamic drag is the resistance a car encounters as it pushes through the air. The faster you go, the more drag you encounter. It scales with the square of velocity, meaning doubling your speed quadruples the drag force. At highway speeds, aerodynamic drag is the dominant force opposing forward motion, consuming more energy than tire friction, engine friction, or drivetrain losses combined. Reducing drag improves fuel economy. In an era of strict government fuel economy standards, CAFE standards in the US, SCO2 emissions targets in Europe, every fraction of a drag coefficient point matters. A reduction in the drag coefficient from 0.32 to 0.28 on a midsize sedan might improve highway fuel economy by 5 to 8%. That doesn't sound like much until you multiply it across a manufacturer's entire fleet, where every fraction of a mile per gallon affects whether they meet federal standards or face penalties worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The drag coefficient, CD, is determined by the car's shape, and the lowest drag shapes are always smooth, rounded, and tapered. Sharp edges create turbulence. Flat faces create pressure zones. Boxy corners create vortices. Every one of these features increases drag. The optimal aerodynamic shape, the one that slips through the air with minimal resistance, looks like a teardrop, rounded at the front, smoothly tapered at the back. You can't make a teardrop-shaped car, obviously. People need to sit inside it. It needs wheels. It needs ground clearance. It needs a flat floor, a windshield, mirrors, door handles, and a trunk. But within those constraints, the goal is to get as close to the ideal aerodynamic shape as possible. And when every manufacturer is trying to get close to the same ideal shape, the results converge. This is why modern cars have steeply raked windshields. A more vertical windshield catches the air like a wall. It's why rear windows slope downward. A vertical back end creates a massive low-pressure zone that increases drag. It's why front ends are rounded and lower edges are smooth. Sharp transitions from the front bumper to the hood and from the body to the undercarriage create turbulence. It's why wheel arches are increasingly flush with the body. Gaps between the wheel and the fender disrupt airflow. It's why door handles are being replaced with flush-mounted electronic buttons. A protruding door handle is a tiny drag source, and when you're fighting for hundredths of a CD point, tiny sources add up. Every manufacturer's wind tunnel gives them the same feedback. Smooth is better than sharp, round is better than square, tapered is better than blunt. The air doesn't know the difference between a Toyota and a Hyundai. It just pushes back against whatever shape it encounters. And the shape that pushes back least is the same shape, regardless of which brand's name is on the hood. Electric vehicles push this even further. EVs don't have the thermal requirements of internal combustion engines. They don't need a massive grill to channel air to a radiator. This allows designers to close off the front end entirely, creating a smooth, unbroken surface that's aerodynamically optimal, but also strips away one of the last remaining design features that differentiated brands. The grille, which for decades was the face of the car, the design element that made a BMW instantly recognizable from a Mercedes, a Lexus distinguishable from an Audi at a glance, is disappearing. Without it, front ends are converging even faster. Some EV manufacturers are trying to preserve grille-like design elements as brand identifiers, even though no air intake is needed. BMW's controversial oversized kidney grille on the iX, for example, exists purely for brand recognition rather than cooling function. Other brands have replaced the grille with light bars, textured panels, or sensors. But the fundamental aerodynamic reality is that a smooth, sealed front end is optimal for an EV, and as more brands go electric, the sealed face look will become dominant. The car's face, historically its most distinguishing feature, is being erased by electrification. Here's a constraint most people don't know exists. Modern cars are designed to minimize injury to pedestrians they strike, and these regulations have dramatically changed how cars look. In Europe, pedestrian impact regulations have been mandatory since the early 2000s and have become progressively stricter. The United States has been slower to adopt formal standards, but global manufacturers design to the strictest market's requirements because it's more efficient to build one design for the world than separate designs for each region. Pedestrian impact testing evaluates what happens when a car's front end strikes a human body, specifically the injury severity to the pedestrian's head, legs, and hips. The tests use calibrated impactors fired at specific zones of the car's front structure at speeds, simulating typical urban collision speeds. To pass these tests, the front of the car needs to be designed with energy absorption in mind. The hood needs to deform in a controlled way when a pedestrian's head strikes it, which means there must be a gap between the hood surface and the hard engine components underneath. This is why modern car hoods sit higher above the engine than they used to. On older cars, the hood was essentially a skin draped right over the engine. On modern cars, there's space, sometimes several inches, between the hood and the engine to allow the hood to crumple and decelerate the pedestrian's head gradually rather than stopping it abruptly against a solid engine block. This design requirement directly affects proportions. Higher hoods mean higher belt lines, the line where the bottom of the windows meets the body. Higher belt lines mean smaller windows relative to the body. Smaller windows mean the car looks heavier, more armored, more aggressive. That fortress look that modern cars have compared to the airy, glassy designs of the 1980s and 90s. The front bumper also needs to be designed to absorb leg impact, the first point of contact in a pedestrian collision. The bumper must be at a specific height range and stiffness to push the pedestrian's legs in a way that causes them to rotate onto the hood rather than being swept under the car. This constrains the height, shape, and structure of the front bumper, pushing every manufacturer toward a similar front-end geometry. Even headlight design is affected. Headlight lenses and housings need to break or deform on impact rather than creating hard, concentrated strike points. This has contributed to the trend of wraparound LED headlight designs with smooth, integrated surfaces. They look modern and sleek, but they're also designed to be pedestrian-friendly in an impact. The combined effect of pedestrian impact regulations is a front end that must be tall, rounded, and soft, with a high hood, a specific bumper geometry, and smooth surfaces. When every manufacturer must meet the same pedestrian safety targets, every manufacturer arrives at a similar front-end design. The blunt, tall, rounded nose that defines modern crossovers isn't an aesthetic choice. It's a regulatory mandate wearing a design skin. Beyond pedestrian impact, the car also has to protect its occupants in a collision. And the structural engineering required for modern crash safety has fundamentally altered what a car can look like. Modern crash testing, by NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the US and Euro NCAP in Europe, evaluates frontal impact, side impact, rear impact, rollover resistance, and the increasingly stringent small overlap front crash. In a small overlap test, only 25% of the car's front end hits a barrier, simulating the common real-world scenario of clipping a pole, a tree, or another vehicle. This test requires the car's structure to manage enormous forces through a very small contact area. To earn top safety ratings, which are essentially mandatory for competitive sales, the car must have a rigid passenger cell surrounded by strategically engineered crumple zones. The crumple zones, the front and rear of the car, are designed to deform in a controlled, progressive manner, absorbing kinetic energy over time and distance rather than transferring it directly to the occupants. The passenger cell, the area around the people, must remain intact, maintaining survival space. This engineering constrains the shape. The car needs thick A-pillars, the pillars between the windshield and the front doors, to resist collapse in a rollover and a frontal offset crash. Thicker pillars mean reduced forward visibility, but the structural necessity overrides the aesthetic preference for thin, elegant pillars. It's why modern A-pillars are noticeably thicker than those on cars from the 1990s, and why drivers sometimes complain about blind spots that didn't exist in older designs. The car needs a strong B-pillar between the front and rear doors for side impact protection. It needs reinforced door structures with side impact beams. It needs a floor structure that channels crash forces around the passenger cell rather than through it. It needs a roof structure that supports the car's weight in a rollover multiplied by a safety factor. All of this structural engineering adds weight and constrains proportions. The height of the roof, the thickness of the body panels, the rake of the windshield, the position of the wheels relative to the body. All are influenced by the structural requirements of modern crash safety. Side curtain airbags need space inside the roof rails. Knee airbags need space under the dashboard. Seatbelt pretensioners need anchor points in specific structural locations. Every passive safety system occupies physical space that constrains the overall shape. A car that looks dramatically different from its competitors would need to find a different structural solution to the same crash problems, and the physics of energy absorption and structural integrity don't offer many alternative solutions. The safest structure looks pretty much the same regardless of brand, which means the cars built around that structure look pretty much the same too. Car design used to be market-specific. A car designed for Japan might look different from a car designed for America because each market had its own regulations, preferences, and manufacturing infrastructure. That era is over. Modern automakers use global platform strategies, a single vehicle architecture that underpins multiple models sold in multiple markets worldwide. Toyota's TNGA platform, Volkswagen's MQB platform, Hyundai's N3 platform. These are shared foundations that support sedans, crossovers, and SUVs across brands and continents. Global platforms are an economic necessity. Developing a new vehicle platform costs billions of dollars. Spreading that cost across millions of vehicles sold worldwide makes each vehicle more affordable. But it also means every car built on the platform shares fundamental dimensions: wheelbase, track width, seating position, structural hardpoints that constrain the design. When a platform is designed to accommodate global regulations, U.S. crash standards, European pedestrian impact rules, Chinese market preferences for rear legroom, Japanese market preferences for compact dimensions, the resulting proportions are a compromise that satisfies every market without being optimized for any single one. And because competitors are making the same compromises on their own global platforms, the proportions converge. The manufacturing side reinforces this convergence. Modern auto plants use shared tooling, robotics, and assembly processes across multiple models. Unique body shapes require unique stamping dies, unique fixtures, and unique assembly sequences, all of which cost money. The more similar the body shapes, the more tooling can be shared, the lower the manufacturing cost. Economic pressure pushes manufacturing towards standardization, and standardization pushes design towards similarity. If you want to understand design convergence, look at crossovers. the crossover segment, which has consumed the sedan market, the minivan market, and a chunk of the truck market over the past 15 years, is the purest expression of every convergence force we've discussed. A crossover needs to be tall enough for easy entry and exit, which is why consumers chose crossovers over sedans in the first place. It needs to be aerodynamic enough to meet fuel economy standards. It needs a hood high enough to accommodate pedestrian impact regulations. It needs crash structure sufficient for top safety ratings. It needs enough cargo space to replace the sedan and the minivan. It needs to fit in a standard parking space. It needs to be light enough for efficiency, but heavy enough for structural integrity. When you take all of those requirements and feed them into the design process, the output is remarkably similar regardless of brand. A roughly 178 to 185 inch long, 68 to 73 inch wide, 64 to 67 inch tall vehicle with a sloping roofline, a blunt front end, short overhangs, a tapering rear, and a ride height of roughly 7 to 8 inches. That describes every compact crossover on the market, not because designers lack imagination, but because the constraints leave almost no room for deviation. The designer's job becomes differentiation within extremely tight constraints, finding brand identity in the details. The shape of the headlights, the angle of the grille, or the grille-less face on EVs, the character line along the body side, the taillight signature. These details are what separate a Mazda CX-5 from a Toyota RAV4 when the underlying proportions are nearly identical. Design at this level is about nuance, not revolution. It's calligraphy within a fixed letter form. The letters are the same, but the style of the strokes is where brand identity lives. Regulations only get stricter. They never relax. This is the ratchet effect that's been progressively constraining car design for decades, and it will continue to do so. Fuel economy standards increase every few years, demanding better aerodynamics. Crash standards add new tests and raise passing thresholds, demanding stronger structures. Pedestrian impact requirements expand to cover more zones and more severe impacts. Lighting regulations specify minimum illumination patterns that constrain headlight and taillight design. Bumper height regulations specify contact zones. Visibility requirements influence greenhouse proportions. Each new regulation narrows the design space a little more. Each generation of cars has slightly less freedom to deviate from the convergent optimum than the generation before it. The cars of 2015 had more design freedom than the cars of 2025. The cars of 2025 have more freedom than the cars of 2035 will. This is not a conspiracy. It's the natural consequence of a society that wants safer, more efficient, more environmentally responsible vehicles. Those are good goals, but they have aesthetic consequences. You can have a car that looks dramatically unique, or you can have a car that gets 40 miles per hour, earns a 5-star crash rating, and minimizes pedestrian injury. You increasingly cannot have both. The physics and the regulations don't allow it. Computational design. When computers draw the car, here's a factor that's accelerating convergence in ways that weren't possible even 15 years ago. Computational fluid dynamics and finite element analysis are increasingly shaping the car before a human designer makes aesthetic decisions. CFD, computational fluid dynamics, is software that simulates airflow around a virtual car model. Engineers can test thousands of shape variations in a computer before building a single physical prototype. They can optimize every surface, every curve, every transition for minimum drag with a precision that wind tunnel testing alone never achieved. The software identifies the most aerodynamically efficient shapes within a given set of dimensional constraints. And those shapes, unsurprisingly, tend to converge on similar solutions regardless of which brand is running the simulation. Finite element analysis, FEA, does the same thing for structural integrity. Engineers simulate crashes, impacts, and loads on virtual models, optimizing the structure for maximum strength at minimum weight. The software identifies optimal material placement, thickness, and geometry. And once again, the optimal solutions converge because the physics of material stress, deformation, and energy absorption are the same regardless of the brand. In previous decades, car design was more of an art. A designer sketched something beautiful, and engineers figured out how to make it work. Now, the process is increasingly reversed. Computational tools define the optimal engineering shape first, and designers add brand identity and aesthetic appeal on top of that engineering foundation. When the engineering foundation is the same across brands, because the physics is the same, the starting point for design is similar, which means the finished product looks more similar than it would if designers were starting from a blank canvas. This isn't to say computers are designing cars. Human designers are still deeply involved in every aesthetic decision, but the computational tools are narrowing the solution space before the designer picks up a stylus. The canvas isn't blank anymore. It comes with a pre-drawn outline that looks roughly the same for everyone. Design convergence isn't limited to shape, it extends to color. Walk through any parking lot and count the color distribution. You'll find that roughly 75 to 80% of the cars are white, black, gray, or silver. The remaining 20 to 25% split among blue, red, and a smattering of other colors. Where did all the colors go? Several factors. Resale value data consistently shows that neutral colors, white, black, gray, silver, hold value better than bold colors because they appeal to a wider range of buyers on the used market. A bright orange car limits your resale audience to people who specifically want bright orange. A white car appeals to almost everyone. Manufacturers and dealers push neutral colors because they're easier to sell and easier to move off the lot. Fleet sales reinforce this. Rental car companies, corporate fleets, and rideshare vehicles overwhelmingly order neutral colors for the same resale and broad appeal reasons. These bulk orders skew production toward neutrals. Manufacturing efficiency plays a role too. Paint shops are expensive to operate, and changing colors between vehicles requires cleaning the paint lines, which takes time and generates waste. Running long batches of the same color is more efficient. When the most popular colors are a handful of neutrals, the production schedule naturally concentrates around those colors. The result is a parking lot that looks like a grayscale image. Dozens of cars with similar shapes and similar colors, differentiated only by headlight shapes and badge placement. The visual monotony isn't just about body shape. It's about the entire package, shape, proportion, and color, all converging toward the same middle ground of maximum broad appeal and minimum risk. Some manufacturers are pushing back. Mazda's Soul Red Crystal paint is a genuine differentiator. It's one of the most visually striking production car colors available, and it's become part of the brand's identity. Hyundai and Kia have introduced bold colors across their lineups. BMW's individual color program and Porsche's Paint to Sample offer almost unlimited color choices for a significant upcharge, but these are the exceptions. For the mainstream market, the path of least resistance is neutral, and most buyers walk that path. One more convergence force worth discussing: screens. Specifically, the trend toward large central touchscreens and digital instrument clusters that has swept across the industry. Tesla normalized the large central touchscreen as the primary control interface. Within a few years, nearly every manufacturer followed. The practical reasons are clear. A single screen is cheaper than dozens of individual buttons, switches, and knobs. It can be updated via software. It reduces dashboard complexity and manufacturing cost, and consumers, conditioned by smartphones and tablets, are comfortable with touchscreen interfaces. But the design consequence is that car interiors are converging just as exterior shapes have. Where dashboards once had distinctive layouts, BMW's driver-focused cockpit angled toward the driver, Volvo's waterfall center console, Mercedes' elegant wood and metal craftsmanship, they're increasingly dominated by one or two large screens flanked by minimal physical controls. The screen becomes the focal point, and screens are rectangles regardless of brand. Some manufacturers are resisting the total screen approach. Mazda has intentionally kept a rotary controller and physical buttons, arguing that touchscreens are distracting while driving. Porsche maintains physical climate controls alongside their screens, but the trend is overwhelmingly toward screen-centric interiors. And as that trend continues, even the interior, the last frontier of brand differentiation, risks converging toward a uniform aesthetic of screens, minimal buttons, and ambient lighting. The obvious follow-up question: if these constraints are so powerful, Why did cars in the 60s, 70s, and 80s look so different from each other? Because the constraints didn't exist yet, or were far less strict. Fuel economy wasn't federally regulated until 1975 with the first CAFE standards, and even then the targets were modest. Cars could be aerodynamic bricks and still comply. Crash safety testing was rudimentary. Pedestrian impact wasn't considered at all. Manufacturers had enormous freedom to design whatever shape they wanted because the physical, legal, and economic forces pushing toward convergence were either absent or weak. In that environment, design was limited primarily by manufacturing capability and consumer taste. Designers could create long hoods, sharp edges, thin pillars, low belt lines, massive glass areas, chrome bumpers, hidden headlights, and wildly different proportions because nothing stopped them. The constraints were aesthetic and commercial, not physical and regulatory. The result was an era of extraordinary design diversity. A 1970 Plymouth Barracuda looked nothing like a 1970 Chevrolet Corvette, which looked nothing like a 1970 Porsche 911. Each car had a distinct personality expressed through dramatically different proportions, lines, and details. People look back at that era as a golden age of car design, and in terms of visual diversity, it was. But it was also an era of cars that crumpled like tin cans in crashes, got 12 miles per gallon, and would launch a pedestrian into the afterlife on impact. The design freedom came at a cost. The constraints that killed that freedom exist because the costs were unacceptable. We chose safety, efficiency, and environmental responsibility. The aesthetic trade-off is that our cars look more alike. Whether that trade is worth it depends on whether you value how a car looks in a parking lot more than how it protects you in a collision. Despite all these constraints, car designers aren't sitting in a room being told to draw a blob. They're working creatively within the constraints, and the best designers produce genuinely distinctive cars, even within the narrowing design space. Surface language. The way light plays across the body panels, the creases, the curves, the transitions between flat and curved surfaces is entirely within the designer's control. Mazda's Kodo design philosophy uses deep concave surfaces that catch light in dramatic ways, making their cars instantly recognizable even though the underlying proportions are similar to competitors. BMW's controversial flame surfacing and later aggressive designs are love them or hate them, but they're undeniably distinctive. Lighting signatures. Headlight and taillight design has become the primary brand identifier. BMW's angel eyes and now their distinctive L-shaped daytime running lights. Audi's sequential turn signals. Porsche's connected taillight bar. Volvo's Thor's hammer headlights. These light signatures are recognizable from hundreds of feet away, even when the overall car shape is similar to others. Proportions within constraints. Even within regulatory limits, there's room for variation. Mazda consistently makes their cars look lower and wider than competitors by managing the visual mass and the character line placement. Porsche maintains their iconic silhouette through careful proportion management, even as the cars grow larger and must meet stricter regulations. Tesla's minimalist approach, removing the grille entirely, simplifying the surfaces, creates a visual identity that's distinct from the chrome-heavy, feature-laden designs of traditional brands. Interior design. As exterior design space narrows, interior design has become an increasingly important differentiator. The driver's experience, the layout, the materials, the screens, the ambient lighting, the tactile feel of controls, is where brands are investing creative energy. The inside of a Mazda 3 feels nothing like the inside of a Toyota Corolla, even if the outside proportions are similar. This is intentional. If you can't make the exterior dramatically different, make the interior so distinctive that customers bond with the brand based on the experience of being inside the car. The honest answer is maybe, but not in the way people hope. Autonomous vehicles could eventually change the equation. If humans aren't driving, many of the current design constraints, forward visibility, driver seating position, steering wheel placement, pedal ergonomics, become irrelevant. A fully autonomous vehicle could have a completely different interior layout, a different greenhouse, and a different exterior shape. But full autonomy at scale is still years or decades away. and the transition period will involve vehicles that must accommodate both human and autonomous operation, which means the constraints remain. New materials could offer some freedom. If a body panel material can absorb pedestrian impact without the gap between the hood and the engine, hoods can be lower. If structural materials can achieve the same crash protection with less mass and volume, pillars can be thinner. Carbon fiber, advanced composites, and new alloys are all being explored. But these materials are currently expensive, and cost is its own constraint. Flexible manufacturing, 3D printing, smaller production runs, customization-friendly assembly processes could eventually allow more design diversity without the cost penalty of unique tooling. If making a unique body panel costs the same as making a standardized one, the economic pressure toward similarity weakens. This is possible in the long term but not imminent. For the foreseeable future, the convergence forces are stronger than the divergence opportunities. Cars will continue to look increasingly similar because the physics, the regulations, and the economics demand it. The differentiation will happen in the details: surfaces, lighting, interiors, color, and brand identity, rather than in the fundamental proportions. Aerodynamics pushes every car toward the same smooth, rounded, tapered shape because drag doesn't care about brand identity. Pedestrian impact regulations require tall hoods, specific bumper geometry, and soft front surfaces. Crash safety engineering demands thick pillars, rigid passenger cells, and engineered crumple zones. Global platform strategy forces shared proportions across brands and markets. Manufacturing economics reward standardization over uniqueness. The crossover segment is the purest expression of convergence. Regulations only get stricter, narrowing design freedom with every generation. Old cars look different because the constraints didn't exist yet. Modern designers differentiate through surface language, lighting signatures, interior design, and proportional nuance within tight constraints. Modern cars don't all look the same because designers are lazy. They look the same because the forces acting on every car, aerodynamics, pedestrian safety, crash structure, global regulations, platform economics, and manufacturing efficiency, are universal. They apply equally to Toyota and Honda and Hyundai and Ford. And when universal forces push from every direction toward a single optimal shape, the results converge regardless of who's drawing the lines. The golden age of wild design diversity was possible because cars didn't have to be safe, efficient, or globally compliant. We look back at those designs with nostalgia, but we forget or choose to ignore the cost. People died in those beautiful cars at rates that would be unacceptable today. The trade-off we've made is aesthetic uniformity in exchange for vehicles that protect their occupants and the people around them while sipping fuel instead of guzzling it. The next time you're in a parking lot and every car looks like a variant of the same silver blob, remember, the blob is saving your life, saving your gas money, and saving the pedestrian you might hit. It's not pretty, but it's working. If this video finally explained why your new car looks like your neighbor's new car, or made you appreciate what designers are doing within impossible constraints, hit like. Drop the car you think has the most distinctive design right now in the comments so we can see who's actually breaking through the sameness. And subscribe so you stop blaming designers for physics problems they didn't create. Later.